Another important management accounting activity is managing the budget preparation cycle. In this mini lecture, we present important reasons for preparing budgets, as well as introducing the all-important behavioural aspects surrounding their preparation and management. Budgets have got many purposes in the life of an organisation, and we can identify a list of the main ones, which is what you see up here. The first and probably most obvious purpose of a budget is that it forces people in every part of the organisation to actually plan, not to think about what's going to happen in the future, not to think about how they might respond to it if it happens, but to actually put toner on paper and plan in detail what they think is the most probable series of events that will happen, usually for the coming year. In doing that planning, it's also apparent that the various functions within an organisation have to talk to each other. So, for example, the sales function will ultimately set a level of what they expect to be the sales activity for the year. In turn, that feeds into information that the production function will need, because they have to plan to produce or acquire the necessary products or services. And that in turn will feed into other areas of the business's organisation, who will need to know that information so that they can plan their hiring strategies and plan their acquisition of raw materials, plan their warehousing and inventory functions, plan their delivery functions, plan their IT support systems, and plan every part of the organisation that fits in behind the original sales forecast and production forecast. What we can deduce from that is that the sales forecast actually sets the level of activity at which the organisation plans to run for the next usually 12 months. Budgets also are a form of communication in that they tell people what is expected of them in what time frame. The next point is very important too. They provide a basis for responsibility accounting, as we'll see in the discussion coming. If people who are responsible for a particular function or a particular area are involved in the budget for that area, then they develop what we refer to as ownership for the budget, and it becomes a requirement, almost a necessary outcome, that they will then feel responsible for achieving what they said they thought would happen. Now, responsibility accounting simply says we will account for each area what it is that they can control, and the stuff that they can't control will be accounted in somebody else's area where they do make the decisions which do control it. And in doing that, that brings us to the next point, that the structure of the budget provides a basis for control of the expenditures of the organisation. Once a budget is approved, and that's an approval process between senior management and the board, then the expenditure within that budget and towards achieving those ends is effectively authorised. The control cycle that flows from that means that we can use that budget to motivate employees. Notice that it's a motivation tool, not a tool for beating people up if for some reason the outcomes are different from the budget. It's a motivational tool. If you're involved and participate in the development of that budget, then it should motivate you to achieve it. So these are our key concepts from the discussion of budgeting: responsibility accounting, understanding what the actual process is, participative budgeting, and what is the master budget. So here first is responsibility accounting, which is where an entity is structured into subsections or subparts, such as strategic business units or divisions or departments. The performance of these units is measured in terms of accounting results, at least partially. And one measure of their performance will be whether they can achieve and stay within the budget that they themselves forecast. So the reporting needs to line up with the responsibility of who budgeted for what purpose. Responsible managers and employees negotiate and prepare the budgets for their own part of the business. And once that's approved, they then become responsible for achieving it. So the accounting system falls in behind that and records those revenues and expenses for which they are reasonably responsible. These things we should also be aware of about the process of budgeting. We need to understand that budgets are prepared by management and negotiated by management, but ultimately they're approved by the board. When we go through the process of budgeting, it's acknowledged, and research supports this, that the best outcomes occur where lower level managers are involved in the process of establishing a budget. And that's for the very obvious reason that if you're involved in developing the budget and you negotiate those budgets, then you achieve some level of ownership of the budget, which is subsequently approved. And if you have ownership of a budget, then it follows that if you are a reasonably motivated employee, you'll be committed to achieving the targets within it. We refer to that environment as participative budgeting, and research has shown us that organisations which honestly and diligently go through a process of negotiating participative budgeting outcomes tend to have a greater probability of achieving those outcomes in the end. Now, a budget period is normally 1 year. That's the normal organisational budgeting cycle. It doesn't have to be. It's convenient, however, because it lines up with the annual reporting process as well. And so it's normal to link budgets with the annual reporting process and the annual accounting structure. And in doing that, the budget mirrors the reporting requirements. And so there are synergies which are achieved through going through that alignment of 1 year. Budgets can then be broken down into as fine detail as is useful. Mostly we'll see them broken down monthly, rarely weekly, but it's certainly possible, quarterly or more. But the point is that the longer the period, the less the control we have over expenditure. Now, control in this environment is not a nasty word. Control is about understanding whether we are performing and delivering what we said we would do when we did the budget. And we set up what's known as a control cycle. We prepare a budget. We compare the actual outcomes with that budget. As a result of that, we calculate variances, which we then analyse and explore. And as a result of that analysis and exploration, we're able to say whether we think that variations are likely to be temporary, perhaps timing variations, or permanent in the sense that something fundamental has changed. And we're also able to say whether we think that the original budget is likely to be achievable or not. And so the control function, which means that the annual budget is broken down into smaller components, and now allows us to monitor our performance against what we expected to achieve. There's not a lot of point in saying 6 months or 9 months after the event, gosh, we didn't achieve what we budgeted, because by then it's too late to change it. But if we split the budget up into shorter operating periods, monthly for example, then we can say a short period after the close of the month, we did better, or we did the same, or we didn't do as well as we thought, and these are the reasons. And if we need to change something in our behaviour, then we can change it promptly, rather than leaving it until it's too late and the opportunity's gone.